I think there's always going to be a challenge in security, and the challenge is that it's asymmetric. So as a good guy, you need to get everything right. And as a bad guy, you need to find one thing that that the good guy didn't get right. I think if you look at the way institutions are currently structured, and have certainly been historically structured, one of the biggest challenges is that we've kind of gone into security with this idea that we should build a really big fence around what we're trying to protect, and we have that patrol. There's CCTV at the fence, there's razor wire on top of it, there are armed guards, and there are guard dogs that bark 24 hours a day walking around the fence. But as soon as you're inside the compound that the fence is protecting, there's a real, it's a chalk and cheese, right? So we've got defense on the outside, and once you're in, it's very easy as a bad guy to capitalize on it. It's the biggest misconception we've found with compromising everyone from the banks to insurance providers and everyone else is that the secretary is as unattractive a target as the CFO. Because once we have compromised the secretary, once she's opened the emails, she's opened the Word document, we've run our macro, and we are embedded on her system, it's just a case of moving laterally. I mean, one of the biggest problems the mines have, for example, is that the networks which govern mines, and I mean, banks are one thing, right? You lose money in a bank, that's not a good thing, that's what you're trying to protect. But in a mine, lives are at risk from cybersecurity issues. And the networks and the IoT, the devices that are connected to mining networks, as an example, I mean, all sort of manufacturing sector is very much the same. I'm just giving mining as an example. They were built and connected in a time when security was not a thing. It was an idealistic time. The internet was going to be this amazing thing which we used to send emails and chat to each other in real time. And so security was never baked in, and those networks were never meant to see the internet. And of course, now they do. Now they need to be connected for efficiency, and you're going to be left behind for your competitors if you don't. And so there are things like mines, IoT devices in mines that control, like drains and valves which keep water out from drowning people, which are on the internet and not safe. So I think it's a combination of all of it. You need your technology to be sound. You also need your people to be well equipped from a security perspective. And you need good, secure processes, the way you handle funds, the way you treat data. Without realizing it, I think for a lot of people, we are getting to the point where attacks against organizations are already AI assisted. Even though it might not be described as such, there's a toolbox that a hacker has, and there are bits and pieces that make up the whole story, from breaking passwords to escalating your privilege on a machine, and different parts of the compromise of an organization have already been automated. And so I think we're already there now in the sense that we have automated or AI-assisted hacks. It's not revolutionary to kind of say that information and crime and the future of crime are inherently tied together now. In a way that it's unprecedented. We've never had it be the case that it has been so inextricably linked, information and crime. Once you have one, you can do the other extremely efficiently and oftentimes at low risk. Now, one of the most underappreciated things about Bitcoin is that for the first time in the existence of humanity, we have the ability to, whenever we needed to manage wealth, manage money or transfer value, you need a bank account. It needs to be tied to personhood, whether it's a natural person like myself or to a company. But something or someone needs to own a bank account for a variety of very sensible reasons. But Bitcoin, for the first time, has allowed autonomous systems to control value. Bitcoin knows as much about personhood as it does about borders, which is to say it knows nothing. So we have got the ability for the first time for an autonomous system to have its own bank account, to pay things, to save, to invest, to do whatever it needs to do, and has its own bank account to do it with. So tying these kind of threads together with information and crime, where we are with self-learning and self-taught systems, and the fact that now we have autonomous systems which can control value. Imagine, we don't have to look too far into the future to envision this. I mean, this is a completely plausible scenario right now, as of today. if we wrote a spam AI, very simple. All the spam AI did was it sent out emails, it blasted out emails to email addresses selling, and in the first iteration, something very basic. We just sell, the kind of standard stuff you can spam filter, Viagra or whatever it is. And it blasts out this kind of data. It made money off, it monetized that, people clicking, buying. It managed with the Bitcoin. It then used the Bitcoin to pay for server rental, and it kind of was self-sustaining. But what if we took it a step further and said, well, what if after every successful campaign it launched, it posted a post on a job forum and actually hired a human developer to write an improvement to its code base? It doesn't have to do it itself, but it's now got financial sovereignty and can employ a human to write an improvement to it. And in fact, it doesn't just employ one human. It posts on 2 or 3 different job boards in different parts of the world asking for improvements, and it can pay the human to make them. After doing so, it now has 3 new versions of itself, which you can deploy to the world and test. And one of them didn't happen to work out, but one of the subsequent subsidiaries that this thing releases of itself happens to be even more effective than the parent, and it's got slightly more advanced spam, it's more enticing, it gets through spam filters, and therefore makes more money. That subsidiary now earns more money and has the ability to reproduce the process, release another version of itself with further improvements, and so on and so forth. What we have is an evolutionary environment to deploy something like an artificial intelligence with a focus on crime and let it learn. It's got constraints of the environment. Unsuccessful versions of itself can't pay for its own server hosting, so kind of die out. And successful ones reproduce with improvements made to its code base. An AI could theoretically self-learn ethics. If you showed an AI 10,000 different scenarios, for example, a self-driving car scenario in which does the self-driving car veer off the side of a cliff or does it plow into the pedestrians it's driving towards already? If it plows off the cliff, it kills one person, the driver. If it plows into the pedestrians, it's going to kill all of them. There are no ethics unless they've been put into the system, and you can imagine that for a hacker, that's probably not high on his list of priorities. I think the quickest and easiest thing you can do to protect yourself online is choose really good passwords and don't reuse them. So the password you use for each and every site should be unique to that website. And more important than complexity, so more important than having lots of special characters and numbers in the password, is to choose long passwords. So for example, saying something like sitting in a chair at Investec is a really good password. That is something that myself as a bad guy and a password cracker, I would not break, and it's easy to remember.